Everything in God's creation has a very unique purpose. Somebody sent me an Alan Watts video not too long ago. I think sometimes when I have these purpose conversations and I talk about the Creator and I talk about God, I'll get these, messages from folks who are like, are you sure? So Alan Watts they sent me something. Basically, the video was purpose doesn't matter. Like your life's purpose doesn't matter. Right? Which, of course, someone would send to me, as you can imagine. Right? So, and I humored them. I listened to it. But this is where Alan Watts lost me. Because he began to talk about nature. And he said nature has no purpose. And I'm like, Alan, no. Alan, no. And then he began to say, why are the birds singing in the morning? Unless they just have a simple song. He's like, what's the purpose of the song? There's no purpose for the song. And I went, Alan, but you're wrong, Alan. The purpose for the bird's song is that it sends out a frequency. And this frequency activates the plant life around it because it knows the sun is about to rise. And as the sun rises, the birds chirp so it can activate the plants because they start their photosynthesis process in preparation for the sun. And if there were no birds, the plant life would not know to wake. Everything the Creator has given us has a purpose, and it knows its purpose. Imagine if the birds didn't sing. Imagine if a bird said, well, I think I should rap. That's what everybody else is doing. That's how you make lots of money. This is what I think I will do. Then the plants wouldn't awake. And if the plants didn't awake, we would have no fruit, no vegetables. And as human beings, simply because one of God's creations did not serve its purpose, we would die. We would be extinct. But at the same time, here we are as human beings, and somehow we believe that we can actually procrastinate. That purpose is the can that we can kick down the road. I'll figure it out later. And not only is our life on the line, but potentially millions, maybe billions of other lives are on the line simply because you haven't stepped into your God-given purpose.
If you wanna be about it, come on, let's talk about it. Change up the things you see. Open your mind to possibilities. Find your power, passion, and your purpose. You know it's time for you to walk in greatness. Let's murder mediocrity. Slay your goals, live out your dreams. Right now. Inspirational perspective.
Some years ago, I read this book by Leo Tolstoy. And many of you, if you're readers, you may know this name, Russian author who wrote War and Peace. Most people have heard, whether they read the book or not, most people have heard of War and Peace as, one of these literary works of art or not, depending on when you read it. I know a lot of us were forced to read it at some point in high school, and it's like watching paint dry when you're young. At least it's like watching paint dry when you're young. But I don't think that's Leo Tolstoy's best work. I believe his best work is The Death of Ivan Ilyak. I don't know. Have you read that book, Ide? You haven't. I don't know if Titus has read that book. But so I want to talk about the difference between when he wrote the books. And somebody might be like, what does this have to do with the scary reality that you're talking about of kidnap potential? Like, just hold for a second. So Leo Tolstoy, he wrote War and Peace when he was young. And when I think about youth, I think about possibility. So he was full of possibility. He was excited about life. And when you're in that place, often you want to do something extraordinary. And that's, in my mind, that's what War and Peace was about. Doing something extraordinary. And for those of you listening, I want you to ask yourself, have you done something extraordinary? Do you believe that you're living an extraordinary life? Because when we talk about kidnap potential, that's one of the main things I want to discuss today, is this whole idea of being extraordinary and what it requires. So when I think about War and Peace, that's where Leo Tolstoy was going. But then, years later, I don't know how many years. Maybe we can research it. Can you do me a favor and research how many years it was between? Because by the way, this is I was riding in thinking about this, so I didn't do the research on this. So I'm starting the show with this because I didn't do the research on it. But how long was it between when Leo Tolstoy wrote War and Peace and the death of Ivan Ilyich? Or Ilyich. People say it different ways. But then later he writes this book called The Death of Ivan Ilyich. And if you read this book, give me a phone call, 773-591-1690 if you read this book as well. So here is, people are probably like, what is this book about? Well, the long and short of the book is Ivan is your above average person. And I say above average because he was a lawyer. So Ivan is your above average person. He basically did everything he was told to do. His father was an attorney, so he grew up, went to school, went to law school, became an attorney. Met a young lady who, tickled his fancy, and he married her. However, he resented her most of the marriage. He resented this woman. And Tolstoy goes into, he really wants you to make sure, this is not a happy marriage. Ivan was not happily married to this woman. And he goes on living this life. That is basically average, right? So and I think this is, in some ways, I think Tolstoy is warning us that if you're above average, you still, you may be more at risk of living an average life than those who are below average. And by the way, I'm going somewhere with this, and something else you should know is that I really want to talk to men today. It's one of the reasons I thought about Ivan Ilyich, right? You got the answer to this? 21. It was 21 years, so he wrote War and Peace, and then 21 years later, he wrote what I think is his greatest work, The Death of Ivan Ilyich. All right, so now why do I think this is one of his greatest works? Because on Ivan's deathbed, he has this question. And this question is, did I do life wrong? Whew. Can you imagine? Right? And and here's the thing, right? This is someone who lived an above average life. Above average. An attorney, someone when, they showed up in social circles, people were like, oh, this is Ivan, right? Because Ivan does important work. Ivan is an attorney. And I imagine that him and his wife, who he resented so much, would show up together, arm in arm, and they would play the role as if everything was okay. And by the way, Tolstoy tells us that one of the reasons he resents his wife is because she nags him so much. And he gave her an above average life. Why are you nagging me? Which is, parallel to what King Solomon said, right? He was like, better to be on the roof during a storm than in a house with a contentious woman, a nagging woman, ladies. So anyway, so he resents this woman because he stayed in the house. He didn't go to the roof. That's a joke, by the way, right? But he's living this above average life, but in many ways, a life that most people can relate to. At least most of us nowadays, because most of us have a career. Most men that I know, once they get to my age, they're married. And so they're living this above average life, right? Living in what you might say is an above average home, driving an above average car, doing above average things. Not extraordinary, right? Not extraordinary, just above average. And so on his deathbed, Ivan asked himself the question of, did I do life wrong? And by the way, he finds out he's dying because he has a fall. Right? So he has this fall. He falls off a ladder, doing something his nagging wife nagged him to do. And it's a good book. Like, I think everyone should read it. And this fall, something's wrong with me. He goes to the doctor. The doctor, you're dying. And on his deathbed, he turns to this woman that he resents. He looks at her and he says, did I do life wrong? I think I did life wrong. Could you imagine? Could you imagine? And by the way, he's not a young man at this point. Could you imagine? And my question is, how does that happen? And by the way, the death of Ivan Iliak, I think, is one of the most meaningful works. I learned about it years ago from listening to Wayne Dyer. He talks about this book when he talks about purpose. And I had to read it because you guys know how I feel about purpose, and it's actually a really good read, but it's one of those reads. If you ever wondered, why does Linnell do the things he do? Why does he have to go trek with gorillas? Why would he do that? What drives him to do this? Why would he scuba dive? What drives him to do these things? It's because after reading the death of Ivan Iliak, I realized I do not want to live my life defined by fear. And when I think about kidnapped potential, often I would say that our potential has been kidnapped by others. A teacher who told you you'd never amount to something, right? And that's meaningful. And that's happened to some people. And that is meaningful. A parent that spoke ill to you as a child and really left you in an insecure state. And you've been in that state. And that happens. And I get it. And that's why we have therapists, and you can sit down and talk to people and coaching and things to work around that, because these are all stories. But then you have the Ivans of the world who were told, you can be successful, and whose success was defined by someone else, defined by others, defined by the norm. Or if we fast forward to 2024, defined by society. What is success in our society today? And in many ways, success in our society today is a really good job. And if you're making over 6 figures and not just 6 figures, but you drive a nice car and you can go out and you wear nice clothes. You know, you got a couple of red bottoms in the closet, some high-end hats, $200, $300, $800 sneakers, whatever. You've arrived. But at the end of Ivan's life, he's not asking about stuff. He's asking about his life. Like his life in particular, like, did I do life wrong? So then that brings us to an existential question of, so what is doing life right? What is doing life right? Well, when I think about doing life right, if there is such a thing, what comes to mind for me is, well, I must be living in full alignment with the one who created me. In order for me to do life right, then I must be living in full alignment with the one who designed me. Which means I'm living my life in many ways by his design. And so if I'm living my life by his design, him being the creator, then what is his purpose for my life? One of the things that has happened to us as human beings is that we've gotten so smart that we've also gotten dumb. And here's what I mean by this. We've gotten so smart that now instead of, I'm not going to go for some creation story, Linnell, come on, all of this came because someone spoke it into being. We evolved over millions and millions and millions of years. And by the way, I'm not going to pretend that I absolutely know how it all came about. I do believe there is a creator, though. And here's the reason I believe. I believe because other really smart people believe. Like Albert Einstein, right? Because, sometimes people try to make you feel foolish when you talk about the creator, when you talk about the creator's purpose for your life. And it's like, well, how do you know? I'm like, well, really smart people like Albert Einstein were like, the more and more I look at how the universe works, the more and more I learn about the earth, the more and more I learn about physics, the more I believe that there's a God. Okay, so I'll go with Albert Einstein on that, right? You can go against him if you want to. Oh, but hold on. What about Nobel Prize winner Max Planck, who studied electrons and protons and how atoms come together? And in his speech, when he accepted this prize, he said, the more I look at how everything around us is made up, I begin, and by the way, I'm quoting, I begin to believe that there is some supreme power and being that dictates the vibration of everything down to the molecule, the atom, the electron, the proton. So that's what Max Planck said. And he was really, really smart. And so I like to align myself with smart people. And so then if he thinks that there was a creator, I'm going to think that there is a creator too. But that's just two people, Linnell. I mean, they were both scientists. What about someone else? Well, then I've read a lot of Carl Jung, who we all know to be a psychologist, and think about how we think about life and how we do things. And Carl Jung, in all of his writings and all of his intellectualism, came down to the conclusion that there must be a God. Well, how about that? Well, I'm not just going to take Carl Jung's word for it. Like, what about someone in 2024, Linnell? Because, Max Planck was back in the early 1900s and Albert Einstein was so long ago. And maybe, just maybe, his religious upbringing and those societies, because God was at the center of everything, maybe that dictated how they thought about a creator. And so, like, give me somebody from 2024. And if I give you somebody from 2024, I would give you Andrew Huberman, a well-known neuroscientist who studies the brain, who said that even when you look at biology and how humans are made and designed, it blows your mind. And by the way, I honestly think that people who don't believe in a creator don't know much about themselves. Because the more you begin to understand about yourself, the more you're like, yeah, somebody did this. Like somebody put me here. But Andrew Huberman said, as he studied the brain, like how it all comes together and the design of the brain and how the brain works and how it functions and even how it restores itself when we abuse it, because we abuse it with alcohol. We abuse it with certain types of foods, which is why we're on day 2 of a cleanse, by the way. But we abuse it with these foods. He said, the more I began to look, the more I began to realize that this is all part of a great design. He said, so I had to go pick up the Bible and I began to read the Old Testament. I began to read the New Testament and I began to pray. This is a neuroscientist who, upon becoming a neuroscientist, was like, science, learning. And the more he learned, the more he began to realize, wait a second here, this is a design. So then if we're designed, there is nothing that humans have designed that don't serve some type of purpose. I think about Elon Musk, one of his recent inventions, the Tesla, that moves by electricity, right? And one of the reasons, the purpose of that design was to capture more energy, because a combustion energy wastes lots of energy, right? And that was the purpose behind his design. I think about the designs of other human beings and creators, and when we look out our windows, the magnificence of what we have collaborated and created, all by design, but each design has a purpose. Each design has a purpose. And how we know what a car is supposed to do. We know what a window is supposed to do. And when the window's not functioning properly, you clean it so that you can actually use it for its design. We know what a mirror is supposed to do. It's supposed to reflect. And if I can't see the mirror, then I know what to do so that it can be aligned with its design. And so here we are as human beings, and we have this knowledge of why everything around us is used, from our computers to our smartphones, but we don't know why we were designed. But I can live day after day and not in any way be curious or even pushed to say, I must know? Because what if I were a mirror and I were foggy and I'm not fully aligned with my reason for being designed? What if I were a computer, but I have a virus and I'm not really being used for my design? My capacity is not there. And so the most magnificent creation on the planet, the majority of the people on the planet have no idea why they were designed. Which means, just like Ivan Illich, at some point, when life begins to escape them, they'll ask the same question: did I spend this time wrong? Did I spend this time wrong? Everything in God's creation has a very unique purpose. Somebody sent me an Alan Watts video not too long ago. I think sometimes when I have these purpose conversations and I talk about the Creator and I talk about God, I'll get these, messages from folks who are like, are you sure? So Alan Watts they sent me something. Basically, the video was purpose doesn't matter. Like your life's purpose doesn't matter. Right? Which, of course, someone would send to me, as you can imagine. Right? So, and I humored them. I listened to it. But this is where Alan Watts lost me. Because he began to talk about nature. And he said nature has no purpose. And I'm like, Alan, no. Alan, no. And then he began to say, why are the birds singing in the morning? Unless they just have a simple song. He's like, what's the purpose of the song? There's no purpose for the song. And I went, Alan, but you're wrong, Alan. The purpose for the bird's song is that it sends out a frequency. And this frequency activates the plant life around it because it knows the sun is about to rise. And as the sun rises, the birds chirp so it can activate the plants because they start their photosynthesis process in preparation for the sun. And if there were no birds, the plant life would not know to wake. Everything the Creator has given us has a purpose, and it knows its purpose. Imagine if the birds didn't sing. Imagine if a bird said, well, I think I should rap. That's what everybody else is doing. That's how you make lots of money. This is what I think I will do. Then the plants wouldn't awake. And if the plants didn't awake, we would have no fruit, no vegetables. And as human beings, simply because one of God's creations did not serve its purpose, we would die. We would be extinct. But at the same time, here we are as human beings, and somehow we believe that we can actually procrastinate. That purpose is the can that we can kick down the road. I'll figure it out later. And not only is our life on the line, but potentially millions, maybe billions of other lives are on the line simply because you haven't stepped into your God-given purpose. And then I think about, we go back to the death of Ivan Ilyak, the death by Leo Tolstoy, the book by Leo Tolstoy. I think about Ivan. Because here's Ivan who had an above average good life. And if Ivan was given the formula at some point to actually live life right, the big question I have is, would he have taken it? Because many of us will listen to that story. We'll listen to that story of Ivan Ilyak and we'll say, oh my God, how sad, how horrible. How horrible is that? Woe is him, as we follow the exact same path. We continue to kick the can of purpose down the road because, Linnell, I'm just too busy being successful. I'm too busy being an attorney. I'm too busy being a government worker. Whatever it is that you do, whatever it is that has completely, in some ways, taken over how you move, how you live, what you do, day in and day out. I'm too busy. I'm too busy to know why I was designed. There's this gift when you know why you exist and you fully align with it. There's this gift. There's a promise and purpose. Part of the promise is peace. This is where I am. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is my design. So whatever happens to me is supposed to happen. Peace. There is promise in purpose. Because when I know my purpose, that means that there's actually a promise that I get to fulfill. Like a promise, and not just any promise, but a promise from the Creator himself. That this is why you're here, and this is what you're supposed to do. And the promise is, if you attempt, you will be successful. Not the first time, maybe not the second time, but you will be successful. So why do we live and die and pass up that promise? So in coaching, we learned these two concepts. Now, first, let me say this. You have the 12 universal laws, and I spent how much time? Like 4 weeks?
Yeah, like 4 different shows.
4 different shows talking about the universal laws, breaking down the universal laws. If you missed that, that's on YouTube too. I would highly recommend that you go back and listen. Now, somebody heard me say universal laws. They like, I thought you believed in a creator. You just gave this case for the creator. I talk about that too in the opening show, that these are the creator's laws, right? These are things that men have figured out. And so we give them names like Pareto's law and the Pythagorean theorem. Like, we give credit to the men that identified the creator's laws, but they're still the creator's laws. One of these laws is the law of polarity. Okay. And very simply, when you think about, the 12 universal laws, the best way for me to describe the law of polarity is that everything has an opposite. Everything has an opposite, okay? And so the law of polarity says that everything in life has an opposite, good and evil, love and fear, warmth and cold. And the key is understanding that these are all two sides of the same coin. So if I have one, the other can live inside me. It's very important for us to understand. All right. Now, I share this because one of the things I believe that many of us, in terms of how we show up as victims. And, don't believe me, just listen to the station tomorrow morning during the morning show. And watch how many of us call in as victims. If they would just, I wish, they treat us so bad. Can you believe what they're doing? On and on and on, right? Now, I'm making somebody mad right now, but just stick with me, all right? Because if we talk about the law of polarity and we talk about what it means to be responsible, on the flip side of responsibility is being a victim. And so we have a choice that we can make. And this ties into purpose. It ties into purpose. It ties into our health. It ties into everything. And one of the reasons we're doing this 7-day cleanse is to be fully responsible for the gift the Creator gave us in our bodies. Full responsibility. But let me describe what a victim is. This is completely off the cuff, but I feel like I need to go here. Let me describe what a victim is. Because here's what happens. You're either one or the other, and according to the law of polarity, you have the capacity to be both. So it's more of when you're doing it versus whether you do it. Okay? Like, let's be clear. It's more about when you're a victim rather than if you're a victim. Like, all of us, including me, have the capacity. Okay? So before you're like, ooh, that's not me, I'm fully responsible, Linnell, it's like you're fully responsible sometimes, and then sometimes you're not. Because according to the law of polarity, if you are fully responsible, you can go completely the other direction in your victimhood. That's just how it is, okay? It's a choice. So victims often feel powerless. Like if I'm acting like a victim, I feel powerless in the face of some act, some circumstance, some condition, or another person. I feel powerless. One of the reasons why I take African Americans to Ghana is because a lot of us feel like we're victims in the United States of America. Now, have we been victimized? Yes. Victimized, if you heard it from an English teacher, would be past tense. And so what happens, because we've been victimized, many of us choose to state right now as present to be victim. And that's a choice. That's a choice. Because you could choose to be fully responsible for how you've been victimized. But if you choose to be victim because you've been victimized, that's a choice because you're no longer a victim. Not right now. Most of us aren't. Okay. Now, are there things happening that you don't like? Yes. But you could be responsible. All right. So most victims feel done to, like something is done to, like you just did that to me. I can't believe you just did that to me. Right? And we feel like we have to defend our lives against other people. Most victims feel the things that they find important are safety. And by the way, this is why the story of Ivan Ilyak hits so hard. Because when you think about his life, and if you're just joining us, I'm talking about Leo Tolstoy's novel, The Death of Ivan Ilyak. You look at his life, like it was a life of safety. It's a life of safety. It was like, he just above average. It's a complete life of safety. And until he was on his deathbed, he realized he had become a victim. Did I do it all wrong? And victims spend a lot of time telling stories, telling themselves stories. Like if you find yourself telling yourself a story about someone else, you are being a victim. And by the way, stories are nothing more than interpretations. They're not facts. And the problem is most of us, we're living our lives as if our stories are facts. It's another, like all of this points back to purpose. Because when I'm clear on my life's purpose, I promised I was going to talk to young men, didn't I? Let me do this real fast, though, because it's in my spirit. And I want to talk to young men next. If you have a young man around you, like, get them close. Because this is a good conversation for them, too, because I believe there are a lot of young men who feel like they're victims. It is difficult to be a young man in 2024. Imagine just right now for brothers who are my age and above. You're 47. I'm 47 years old. I'll be 48 years old this day. Imagine being a heterosexual male. Normal male, right? Not that anything else is abnormal. Okay, let me say that. But just imagine being a heterosexual male in today's world where everything that's even happening for your own biology is wrong. Is wrong. And you've come into this physical strength that you have to be very careful with. Incredibly careful with. And I'm not condoning irresponsibility. I mean, we're having a conversation about being responsible. But there are very few people that can teach you how to be responsible with it. Like, imagine that. And you are being told as a heterosexual male that you have to be successful. You have to be successful. And the woman around you won't date you if you're not. And by the way, if you're in your early 20s, it's impossible to be. Like, you're just getting it together. I don't want you. Well, like it's. Dr. Jordan Peterson talks about, and I'm going to stay in this theme of victim and responsibility. Dr. Jordan Peterson talks about how 90% of the people that come to see him are men. And at any given time, the lowest it may drop is to 80%. And he says, and he believes, he was talking about, and I believe the reason these men are coming to me is because they're lost. Here's what I want to say to young men. In 2024, if you are a young, single man, I don't care about your sexuality. I was talking about heterosexuals in particular because there is a sense of alienation that's happening for them, right? Because it's like, I never thought I would see the day where it's just not cool to be a dude. Just to be a regular guy. Like, and where you don't have the space to make mistakes. And like that space is shrinking. For parents right now, if you're listening, for anyone who knows a young man that you care about, it is critical that young men know their purpose. Like, young men no longer have the luxury of being lost, because them being lost is ending in suicide, is ending with prison, it's ending with medication, it is ending in awful, awful ways. Awful ways. And the one, like, if somebody say, well, Linnell, what's the silver bullet? The one silver bullet that I see for young men is knowing your life's purpose. I think back to when I was 22 years old, and I had the opportunity to distinguish my purpose. I was headed nowhere fast, man. Let me tell you, like, some of the things that I was doing, like, I've been a part of ACA now for a number of years. ACA is Adult Children of Alcoholics. And last year, I spent the entire year going through the amends process. And the amends process is where you look back on your life and you make amends for things that you've done that you know you shouldn't have done. And one of the things I made amends for was stealing money from a job, okay? And somebody's like, oh my God. It's like, look, man, like any young man out here right now who you just listen to me. Don't this ain't for nobody else. This is for you. Okay. That's who I'm speaking to. So one of the things I made amends for is stealing. And I grew up in a two-parent, let me qualify this first, right? Because I grew up in a two-parent household, two great parents, Christian household, right? Christian parents. We went to church Sunday morning. We went to church Sunday night. We went to church Tuesday night. We had Bible class Friday night, choir rehearsal Saturdays. There was only 2 days out the week I wasn't in church, and I still stole cash out of register, okay? And I ain't talking a little bit. I stole a lot. I was able to steal a lot because I was smart. So all the smarts that you see in terms of how I put together topics and weave things together, like I had, the intellect was there. However, I had left home at 17. And I was trying to figure out how to survive as a young black man in a world that I didn't know I was ill-equipped for, and I wasn't going back home because they didn't understand me there. But I started to realize they didn't understand me out here, and so I felt isolated, and I felt lost. And so I got to do what I need to do to survive, and when you're in survival mode, you do things you're not proud of. So I was stealing money. I don't even think my wife knows the story. Right, and I went through the amends process and, donated the amount of cash that I took to a nonprofit, et cetera, but I did this thing. If I were caught, I might not be the Linnell Harris you know. What changed my life was purpose. It wasn't somebody coming to me saying, young man, you need to be saved. Like here's the thing, and this is why I want to talk to young men, because when somebody comes to you and say that at 19, 20, 21 years old, when your hormones are off the chart and all you want to do is like look at girls and all that, like, you need to do this. You need to pull all that in and deny all of that. And you need to do this. It's like, it doesn't seem reasonable because they're not really giving you some kind of antidote outside of some spiritual, like, I don't understand what you mean. Jesus can take away all of that. And it's like, okay, I'm going to do it because I did. I remember going to the altar at 20-something years old to get rid of all this stuff. And then after the emotional feeling, later that night, I was by myself and it all came back. What am I supposed to do with that? What young men are not being taught is purpose. What is your life's purpose? Who are you? What are your talents? How can you take these talents and don't use them for evil? Because I was using my talents to figure out how to survive. But use them to help other people live the best life. That's my purpose, right? Or use them to do this, use them to do that. But use them in a way that the Creator designed you for why you are here. Because right now, most young men between the ages of 17 and 24 are confused. And even if they don't admit it to you, I can tell you because I remember just how confused I was. And the gift that they need is purpose. Years ago, my cousin called me up. He was concerned about his son. His son was 19 years old at the time. It's like, man, all he does is, play video games, watch YouTube. I don't know what's going on in his room, but, I need you to talk to him. I need to figure out, because I'm going to force him to get a job. He says what he's doing can make money. I don't know. I said, well, send him to the course. So he sent him to the course. He goes to the course. He distinguishes that his purpose is to be a YouTube influencer and to share a perspective on sports and to share a perspective on life in sports that nobody is doing right now. And a lot of what's happening in the media is, they're being paid to say things, and I don't ever want to be that person. It was so compelling that I remember there were other people in the room. And, they were looking at him. He was 19 years old. And I could see people looking at him like, oh, that's sweet. It's like, but there was conviction there. And I said, look, young man, you continue to do what you're doing. Today, he out-earns me by a lot. Doing exactly what he said his purpose was. I know it works. Married with a child, hasn't cracked 30 yet. But his father had to work. Because sometimes we have these conversations and people are like, oh, they're thinking about themselves. And it's like, maybe it's about you and your son. Maybe you should make the investment to save your son's life. And in exchange, save yours. And I think sometimes we get it twisted, but I wanted to talk to the young man because I know how this changed my life, and I saw how it changed Kentrell Beecham's life, the king of the fourth quarter. Go look him up. He is killing the game. His father made small investment. He's giving so much more back to his father and his family. Small investment. I told his father, because he was my cousin, you don't got to pay. He said, no, cuz, I'm going to pay you because that's a seat. I'm going to pay you. I don't know, he typically listens, but if you're listening, man, I love you, cuz, because he's one of those fathers that I aspire to be in terms of how he raises his children and who he is as a father for his children. Purpose. Victims deal in force, control. Like a victim is a control freak. Isn't that weird? That you would think the responsible one is a control freak, but the victim is the control freak. They're constantly doing, what are you doing? Where are you at? What's happening? Blah, blah, blah. Because they're waiting to be victimized. Or they're trying to control whether or not you will victimize them. And a person who's fully responsible, let's put this in the context of a marriage, right? Like a controlling wife. Always, where you at? What you doing? Versus saying, how can I be responsible for who I am as a wife, that if he makes a bad decision, it's a bad decision because I'm that good. versus what you doing where you at. And then, see, the other thing a victim does is they get agreement from other victims around them. That's what I hear a lot on this station. I'm just calling it like I see it this morning. You know, oh, this is so bad. The immigrants, this. Like, oh, how can we be responsible as a community? How can we take responsibility? How can we set it up in a way, like, why aren't we curious about, well, why is it that it can't happen in other communities? Like, let's get curious about that and then create that for our communities. The other things that a victim does is a victim seeks advice. Like they will want you to tell them what to do so they can blame you when it doesn't go right. Hey, what should I do about this? Or victims also wait for a rescue. And by the way, like I'm really want us to understand this as a community. Like it's 2024, they say telling the truth. Let me tell the truth. Like a lot of us waiting on reparations to rescue us. That's a victim mentality. Now, do we deserve reparations? That's a whole nother conversation, and I believe we do, but I'm not waiting. Reparations ain't going to change my life. It's not going to. And it's not going to change yours unless you change it. We've already discussed that 90%, maybe not with you all, but with another group, Masterclass. 90% of lotto winners end up bankrupt because they weren't millionaires. So then somebody rescues them from the financial problems and all they do is recreate them. Now, here's the other thing, like most victims, they'll be like, ooh, he's wrong, and I got the facts for that. But what they don't realize is the facts for that are just interpretations. They're not really facts. And here's the troubling part about being a victim. Very little joy, very little satisfaction. You can ask them how satisfied they are with any aspect of their life, and they'll have to think, how satisfied are you with your health? Well, if they didn't do all this to the food, victim. Like, cleanse yourself, get yourself right. How you feel about your marriage? He just... Very little nothing you can do. Nothing you can do. Did he just buy you a car? Well, girl, I mean. But more than anything, no power. No power in their lives. And they're blaming everybody else for their lack of power, when power comes from within. What does it mean to be responsible? What does it mean to be responsible? I don't know why this dropped in my spirit. Is like, do this. I'm like, all right. What does it mean to be responsible? People who operate, like, by the way, to be responsible means that you're going to do everything you can to know your purpose on the planet. Let's be clear. Like, I need to know why I'm designed so I can take full responsibility for the pursuit of that. That's number one. When people operate from the context of responsibility, they are accountable for their interpretations and stories. Oh, I saw that the wrong way. That was me. They're accountable for their behavior. Sometimes, you ever had a person, like, I wouldn't have been like that if you didn't do this. What? So I made you this way? How much more of a victim can you be? You don't have a standard for your own behavior? You don't believe me? Cut somebody off. Oh, you made me mad. How can they make you mad? How does somebody have that kind of power? You're a victim. Responsible people don't spend a lot of energy estimating how things got to be the way they are. How they do this to us? Why we in this situation? Somebody asked me some time ago, Linnell, why you don't talk about politics? Why you don't talk about what's going on in the community? Like, what sense does it make to talk about how we got this way? Instead, let's talk about what it looks like to be responsible for ourselves. Because if I'm responsible for myself, that responsibility, it emanates to everything around me. And if, as a community, we are being fully responsible, then what happens is the community transforms. It can't help but to transform. I hate all this trash on the street. Then pick it up. There's been plenty of times I'm in my neighbor's yard and I'm picking up. Fully responsible because I want it to look a certain way. You might not want it to look, but I want it to look a certain kind of way. I have guests coming by. A victim, all they do is drop all the time. Every morning I wake up, it's just more trash on the street. Okay, well, do something about it. The responsible person looks at oneself as the source of all aspects of their life. If my health is not going well, it's on me. If my marriage is not going well, it's on me. What can I do different? Most of us would be like, they need to be different. If my job is not going well, it's on me. Well, now you don't know my boss. Well, get responsible. Maybe your boss won't be on you like that. You ever notice how they don't bother the superstars? But it's the average folk that get annoyed? Interesting. Maybe I'm incomplete because I'm a boss. I don't know. The responsible person looks at what works. Let me skip this one. The responsible person they don't look at their finances like, how did this happen to me? They take responsibility. You know what? I need to save more. This caught me off guard. What am I going to do about it? The responsible person, how can I take it to the next level? A person who is responsible, they have very few psychological assessments of other people. Victims are the top psychologists. Well, she did that because this is how she is. And, that's how they are. People like that, they just. Instead, the responsible person's focus is on what action will transform all this. And by the way, if in fact that person is this way, the responsible person is, you can't come over here no more. It's just that simple. Why would I be a victim of your behavior? You're just not welcome in my home anymore. You're not welcome in my space, nor will I be in yours. The responsible person is able, willing, and strives to tell the truth about what has been done and what is done. And what hasn't been done, hasn't been done. And I'm responsible for it. The responsible person is not concerned with looking good. What they're concerned about is that life works. It doesn't matter if it looks good or not, my life is working. That's what matters. By the way, men, that's something to keep in mind for your marriage because, it ain't going to always look good, but is it working? Real responsibility is not to be confused with blame. If I'm blaming, I'm a victim. If I'm crediting someone with something that happened, that happened because of this, I'm a victim. And by the way, I have to say it two ways because if I just say blame, then the next person be like, well, no, they did do that. I'm just letting everybody know that they did do that. They did do that. It's that's being a victim too. No, it's a fact. You talked about interpretations and stories. It's a fact that this happened. I'm just letting everybody know, victim. A responsible person is not concerned with whose obligation or duty it is. It's not my job. Shouldn't the alderman be doing it? The alderman should be doing that. The mayor That's not, a responsible person is not pointing at whose obligation and duty it is. A responsible person is only concerned with the facts and how they bear, get this, on the next appropriate action. What's happening? What's the fact? And what am I going to do about it? There's no concern whether the facts give credit or blame. No one cares because there's an action to take. And when a person operates from responsibility, they own their results, they're not intimidated, and they're not weighed down by the opinions of others. A responsible person has the freedom to act. Think about that. Freedom to act. You know what's crazy? Everybody who can hear the sound of my voice has the freedom to act. And if you don't, it's because you've been seduced into victimization. I said the beginning of this year, I'm talking about two things: health and well-being, purpose and spirituality. Those are the bookends that hold up relationship and money. Everybody want to be in love. Everybody want money. But most folks ain't willing to take care of themselves. How you going to take care of somebody else? You can't take care of you. You're in poor health and you won't do anything about it. Don't you realize relationship takes some kind of sacrifice? Some folks, we talked about the cleanse. I already know you like, I can't do that. Oh no, are you kidding me? Oh, I can't do that. You know how many things you can't do when you get in a relationship? Just to make the relationship work. Not from victim, just for being responsible for the relationship. Like, that's probably not the right decision. It's a great practice to not be able to do things for yourself. Like take care of your health. It's great practice. You're building a muscle. You want money, like in order to actually manage money properly, you know how many things you can't do? The more money you have, the more money that you perceive you can do things with. You know how often you have to say no when you have money? See, and if you ain't practicing saying no, then when you get money, you ain't going to say no. You're going to end up like all the other lotto winners. No money. So what do? You build it. You build it through the discipline of purpose. You build it through the discipline of health and well-being. That's why I say it, man. Health and well-being, purpose and spirituality are the bookends for everything else you want. Even the good book says, seek ye first the kingdom. What is the kingdom? Your purpose. Why am I here? And all the other things will come. Because once you understand why you're designed and you're able to function fully in that design, then all the other stuff you want to have will come. Be, do, have. You can't have what you don't be. We want it the other way around. I just want to have it. And it's like, nah, man, when are you going to be fully responsible for you? I want to give you an invitation. It's not too late. Join this cleanse. Like, I believe that there is a link between who we are spiritually and who we are physically. And one of the reasons why I asked the Moonies to support me with you all doing this cleanse is because if we can exercise the physical discipline necessary to detox and cleanse the physical body, it opens up a new level of spiritual strength. Spiritual strength. My purpose is your success. And the Creator gave me this purpose, 22 years old, man. I was lost. But here's what it did. I realized I couldn't help anybody else. I had to help myself. And so I took on this sense of personal responsibility. Linnell, how can you be better? What can you do? And that journey fueled me to a point where now I have the capacity to help other people. And that's what I'm up to. If you asking yourself, why does he care? That's why, because I was designed to care. Part of my essence is love. I fought it too. I don't want to have to love people. I gotta love people. I found that it's one of my biggest strengths. January 27th, Purpose Workshop. Question is, will you allow me to support you in your pursuit of why you were designed and what it is that you're up to? Hey, my inspired peoples. Linnell Harris here, certified ontological coach and trainer. I'm so excited that you're watching the channel. By the way, did you know you can catch the show live at 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. every Sunday morning? You can. All you have to do is go to my Facebook stream, Coach Linnell Harris, catch the stream live, or you can listen to the radio show via iHeart at WVON 1690 AM. But since you're here, if you love the content, I ask that you share it, like this particular video, and subscribe to the channel. I hope you're having a great day.